I hunt people for a living. This is what that actually looks like. I was 10 years old the night I watched police arrest a neighbor and understood how the world truly worked. Every evening, my father removed his badge and locked his weapon away. I watched and wanted that life. My classmates chased ordinary things. I was studying crime scene methodology before I was 16 years old. No teacher in that school could explain where the law stops and real justice begins. That gap defined me. 300 people sat that entrance exam. I had already decided the top position belonged to me alone. The first morning they demanded we follow without questioning. I understood discipline and obedience differently. The sparring bell sounded, and I registered it clearly. I pressed forward regardless. Fields don't have bells. Good surveillance means becoming a fixture of the environment, invisible, patient, absorbing every small detail. My name was called, and the room applauded. I was mentally already inside the first case file waiting for me. She answered every question without hesitation or discomfort. In 20 years of interviews, that was genuinely rare. We exchanged vows, and I told her I would always return. That particular promise lasted less than 1 month. They handed me a thin file on a low-level dealer and called it entry level. I treated it like everything. Cold coffee and 7 consecutive nights in a parked vehicle taught me more than any training program did. I constructed the entire case architecture alone and signed nothing when I passed it to the operation team. Television crews filmed the arrest from every angle for half an hour. I had already written my next report. The chief pushed a thick file toward me and said my name was the only one he trusted with this matter. One criminal network spanning 40 individuals and 12 cities. I mapped every connection using red thread. My informant placed himself in genuine danger every single day for months. He deserved far more than gratitude. She finished her dinner alone again without speaking. I sat down across from her and matched her silence. They placed her in my arms, and the entire previous chapter of my existence became suddenly irrelevant. My work phone rang 4 consecutive times on the living room table. I chose to stay on the floor, playing. I set one photograph on the table and folded my hands. Waiting in complete silence broke him in minutes. A single procedural timestamp error invalidated 3 months of documented investigative work overnight. I conducted surveillance without any warrant because certain individuals cannot afford the luxury of due process. Breaking entry was a criminal act by definition. Finding the financial records inside was an absolute necessity. He shouted at me across his desk for 6 full minutes. The case was already filed. His anger changed nothing. Someone had photographed my wife and daughter on their daily route and placed the prints under my door. I told her the separation was only temporary while folding her clothes into a bag. She knew I was lying. My daughter waved from the rear window until the vehicle turned the corner. I stood there well after. The apartment became irrelevant. The office became home. The investigation became the only existing world. An anonymous caller described exactly what would happen to my family if I continued pursuing the case. I parked outside and confirmed the lights were on inside. Knowing they were safe was sufficient for that night. One folded note passed secretly beneath a cafe table contained the single address I had spent a year finding. 9 individuals arrested inside 11 minutes in a building I had memorized entirely from stolen blueprints. Official closure stamp applied to the file. My personal notebook still held one name that no file ever mentioned. My colleague read an address over the radio, and I recognized each word before the sentence was completed. The officers at the perimeter read my face and moved aside without requiring any explanation from me. Everything I had trained myself to suppress for 2 decades became completely useless inside that doorway. 4 victims, identical signatures at every scene. The team had worked 8 months without a single solid lead. Grief is an operational liability. I compressed it and converted every remaining hour into investigative work. Removing my badge from my belt and placing it on his desk was the clearest decision I made that entire year. Losing official credentials simply meant locating alternative access points. I have always known where they are. The attack in the alley was intended as a final warning. I interpreted it as confirmation I was getting close. One unregistered number connected to 4 separate crime locations across 4 different calendar months. I drove 200 kilometers through the night with no authorization, no backup, and no intention to stop. 4 separate neighbors, 4 identical descriptions: quiet, polite, private. I had read that profile before. Surveillance photographs of my family covered an entire section of his wall alongside his other chosen victims. He documented each killing in precise clinical language, the way a scientist records an unremarkable experiment. Same stall, same bread, same Tuesday morning every single week without exception. Habit is always the end. One moment of eye contact across a crowded market. Recognition was mutual and simultaneous. Then we ran. My body was failing completely by the 3rd block. My mind had already placed both hands on his collar. The alley ended in a wall, and he turned to face me with an expression that contained no fear whatsoever. He stopped resisting, and I stood over him in the dark and thought about every single thing he had taken. That forest absorbed every sound except my breathing and the steady rhythm of the shovel hitting earth. Dawn made the city look innocent from the hilltop. I called her number. She answered before the second ring.